Did you know your credit card points and miles can lose value to inflation? Credit card companies often reduce the redemption value of your points and miles. Now imagine a credit card with rewards that can grow in value. With the Gemini credit card, you can earn Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos instantly with no annual fee. Every swipe at the store or gas pump earns you instant rewards deposited straight to your account. Plus, sign up now for a $200 Bitcoin bonus to kickstart your rewards. Visit Gemini.com/card today. Check out the link in the description for more information on rates and fees. Again, if you're looking to invest in Bitcoin but don't know where to start, the Gemini credit card makes it easy.
Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Tristan Freeman, who does an incredible job over at Busting Brackets. We're going to be touching upon a wide variety of topics with him. How much/little stock does he put into these exhibition results? We're starting to see those come out. We're going to be taking a look at sort of the middle teams out there in the ACC. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Big Ten as well. We're going to be getting his thoughts on a few teams that he's feeling bullish/bearish on as well, and just the increased importance that freshmen are going to be having this year, and just any other sort of dynamics that are going to be a little bit different than this year. I bring up freshmen just because we no longer have most of these guys are COVID fifth-year guys, other than Chad Baker-Mazara, who's now 25 years old. So that's always a lot of fun, but we're going to be chatting about those topics and a little bit more with Tristan here in this podcast, and we're getting you set for the upcoming season. I have one conference preview remaining, by the way. That would be the Big Ten. Expect that up within the next 48 to 72 hours. That is certainly on the to-do list, and then we'll have every one of these conference previews up. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, make sure you put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll get you a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. And now let's chat with our good friend Tristan, who not only does great work over at Bustin' Brackets, but I know he's done some contributions for the Field of 68's newsletter. He does some great work over at Sleepers Media as well. Truly a 5-tool player when it comes to taking a look at college basketball. That's a baseball term, but you get what I'm saying. He's playing positionless basketball. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at HoopsNut351. And Tristan, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Tristan. And something else I appreciate is you know that the college basketball season is close when you got everyone on social media going absolutely ballistic about these exhibition results, these secret scrimmages. Heck, there were people trying to make up a secret scrimmage result between LaSalle and Rutgers, even though they didn't actually scrimmage. So that's where we are at. There are people very, very hungry for college basketball, but how do you take a look at these exhibitions and these secret scrimmages? Because sometimes I think that it can be a good indicator coming into the season of what we might get, and then sometimes you get a wackadoo result, like I think East Texas A&M knocked off someone last year. They turned out to be absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I mean, as a basketball fan who haven't had, games for the last 6 months, it's great to at least see players on the
It's like
court.
finding water in the desert.
And honestly, considering that coaches are, especially for high major games, are playing their expected rotations for guys who are healthy, you do get something out of it. Seeing Malachi Smith get the start and nod for UConn, and Dan Hurley saying that he might start next to Solo Ball and Silas DeMary once he's healthy. Like, those are things that you can take away from it. Now, the results aren't necessarily going to say, hey, UConn won by double digits or going to win the Big East, or, Boston College is cooked, but you can at least get to see which players are playing, who's in the rotations, and who could be potential breakout guys to watch for.
Yep, exactly. And certainly those assessments at Boston College might be cooked, actually might be very, very accurate, but I get what you're saying there exactly. And how much do you want to take a look at just the individual player results rather than more or less the team result? Because I think that you bring up something so fascinating with regards to seeing some of these guys in the rotation. And I wouldn't doubt it if a lot of these coaches, when they go into their scrimmages, maybe they think, hey, this might be the number 3, number 4 guy. Let's see what he's able to do with a few more shots than what he would normally see.
And, I think a good example of that is Baylor looking at, a guy like Yesufu, who's the next star freshman. He put up a lot of shots for the Bears in their exhibition matchup last week. And if he's as good as, we think he can be, then Baylor's going to be a surefire tournament team and a top 4 or 5 team to watch in the Big Ten. And that's just one of the examples where it is interesting to see which guys take a lot of shots in the preseason, because some might be reserved or others are just ready to let it fly right now.
Yep, exactly. And I do think that that is so interesting to be able to gauge moving forward, as Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Boston Brackets. I know he's doing some great work over at Sleepers Media and the Field of 68 as well. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to the early part of the season, how much do you want to take a look at some of these teams that do/do not have chemistry? Because I think that these exhibition matchups are much more meaningful for these teams that they've got like 10 transfers coming in. It's a completely overhauled roster, coaching year number 1. Rather than say, I'm just going to spitball an example here, a team like Purdue, where we know what we're going to be able to get out of Fletcher Lawyer, we know what we're going to get out of Braden Smith. That's a backcourt that has been playing together for multiple years. I don't think that the results are as meaningful for them as, say, a team like USC that just always turns over their roster.
Yeah, well, you mentioned USC, and it's interesting because you already talked about, not taking preseason games too seriously. Last year, they knocked off Gonzaga in a high-scoring affair, and I think everyone thought, okay, that they're going to be, a national contender, and they end up, almost missing out on the Big Ten tournament because they just underwhelmed. So, yeah, teams like USC who are going to have completely new rosters, you know what you're going to get from Purdue. Their rotation's probably already set outside of who, the 7th and 8th, 9th man can be. Although it will be interesting to see how Trey Kaufman-Renn, one of the best big men in the country, how he'll pair with Oscar Clough, the South Dakota State transfer, because, can they fit? Are they a good defensive lineup? How's the spacing going to work with that? So that is something to watch, even with Purdue, because what Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer is going to do. But that is a new storyline to watch, because if that duo inside works, then they are likely a team to beat this season.
Yep, and I do think that that is going to be such an interesting dynamic, and there's going to be a lot of intrigue out there in the Big Ten, because we just are on the topic right now talking about USC, Purdue, what have you, and I think that it's very clear in the Big Ten that you've got Purdue as a clear number 1. I would consider Michigan to be a very clear number 2, but I think everything after that is a big question mark, and I think that there's going to be, as there always is in the Big Ten, and it's much like the Atlantic 10A conference that you cover oh so well, just a lot of chaos in the middle, and 1 or 2 bounces being the difference between a team being like number 5 or number 6 in the rankings, or perhaps missing out on the Big Ten tournament altogether.
See, teams like Maryland and Washington pick double figures in the Big Ten. People, forget there's now 18 teams in that conference, so someone's going to have to be picked outside of 9th. I think there's probably a consensus bottom 3 with Penn State, Rutgers, and Minnesota, but everyone else has, potential. They have talent. Have guys that can keep it very interested. Indiana, considered to have one of the top, 3 to 5 transfer classes, or a team that I think was picked, 11th? So even with that much talent coming in, there's still potential that they're going to be on the bubble. And others probably argue that they're a top 25 team. I think they have top 25 talent, but we'll have to see. But it's definitely something to watch, especially in conferences that are super big, because especially even in the SEC where all but 2 teams make a tournament, all of them lost plenty of talent. So we'll see which of them has the bigger drop-off.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned the SEC, because just a few days ago, I did my SEC conference preview as well, and I do want to get your thoughts a little bit out there, because with Kentucky, there's still a little bit of question mark as to what we're going to be getting down low out of them, but things became a little bit more clear over the last, we're going to call it about week and a half or so, as it appears as though Jaden Quanten's coming off of that major injury that kept him out towards back half of last season. He seems to be recovering well, but Andre Jelovic, hopefully you got that last name correct, 6'11", 6'7" big man, a little bit more of a stretch guy. He is going to be eligible, a little bit of an international man of mystery for them. And personally, I pick Kentucky to win the SEC. You had an up row and front row seat to Jalen Lowe and all that he was able to do at Pittsburgh last year. And I want to get your thoughts on this team because it feels like there's a lot of people are chattering it up about teams like Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and with Kentucky, I mean, for lack of a better term, for a lot of people, we're not necessarily stands of theirs when we had John Calipari over there, but I think that Kentucky has really done a nice job under Mark Pope thus far, and I really love the overall balance of this roster.
Yeah, and because of the transfer moves they made in the offseason, I think them returning their leading scorer and preseason player of the year, Otega Oweh, still flies under the radar a bit. I mean, the fact that you have him back as a go-to guy is just going to raise the ceiling for everyone, including Lowe and a guy like Cam Williams, who's been getting NBA draft buzz as that 6'8", 3-and-D type wing. But it's going to come down to, how healthy is Jaden Quaintance, because I never believed that he was going to be ready opening night coming from an ACL injury. But will he be 100% by league play? Could it be something that affects him all year? Because he's still going to be a highly touted draft prospect, regardless of whether he's 100% or not. But there is going to be a drop-off if you go from him to a Brandon Garrison or one of the freshmen, Moreno and Jelovic. They do have plenty of depth inside, even without Quaintance, but it will be interesting to see whether or not the front court scoring production could be a potential flaw to watch for with the Wildcats.
Yep, and certainly what you're going to be able to get out of the 7-footer in Malachi Moreno is going to be interesting as well. And you mentioned with Quaintance, how bad is that injury? Is he going to be back, and is he going to be back to himself when he does return as well? There are a few question marks there, but I certainly do think that there's going to be a lot of upside with Kentucky moving forward. And I think that this is a great stopping point for part number one. And part number two, we'll talk about more of those middle tier teams in the SEC. We're going to talk about the importance of taking a look at freshmen this year, with there being far fewer guys on their COVID fifth year. And we're also going to be taking a look at a few teams that Tristan is feeling a little bit more bullish/bearish on leading up to the upcoming season. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peters, and now a part of the Beats and Family Podcast. Here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Tristan Freeman. He does such an excellent job over at Bustin' Brackets, coupled with that Field of 68 and Sleepers Media, and you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at HoopsOn351. We were talking last about Kentucky and just the overall firepower that I feel like they've got, and I do want to get your thoughts on the SEC as a whole, because I've said this over the last few weeks. It's something that I've dove in on a little bit more. It feels like with the SEC, maybe their top 5/top 6 is not quite on par with what you've got out there in the Big 12. I feel like the top 5/6 teams with the likes of Houston, Arizona, certainly have to take a look at Kansas, even though they might be a little bit down this year. Texas Tech, you just go down the list. I feel like they might be a little bit more talented than the SEC's top 5 or top 6, but the SEC just seems to have so much depth this year to where those teams are like 7-11, 6-11. I think that there's a lot of upside with those teams, and I think that in the SEC, the margin between team number 1 and team number 8 this year could be as thin as we've seen in a power conference in quite some time.
Yeah, the SEC in particular, again, so many teams lost talent that I think the top, even though will still be very good because you obviously have, several preseason top 12 teams, I do think the middle is going to be able to catch up with them as well. I mean, Texas A&M was a team picked to be in the middle lower tier, but they have plenty of talent with a new head coach. Vanderbilt had a good portal off season. And, Texas and Sean Miller's flying under the radar because they bring back 2 starting guards and got some interesting transfers on the wings and the front court as well. And then Ole Miss, if we get, Wisconsin version AJ Storr with already having one of the better front courts in the league, now suddenly they're going to be contenders. So it's going to be very compelling to watch. I think we're going to just have to see which transfers end up breaking out, along as which freshmen are going to be able to carve out a role with so many seniors gone. But yeah, the SEC, while it may not be historically great, it's still going to be very good and very compelling from start to finish.
Yeah, trying to get 14 teams back into the NCAA tournament might be a little bit of a challenge, but certainly they're going to get over half of their conference into the field. I feel very confident in that, and those middle teams out there in the SEC are teams that you don't want to be messing with, as we have our good friend Tristan Freeman, who does such amazing work over at Boston Brackets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that as well with regards to the freshmen, which ones are going to be breaking out, because I think that that's a bigger key this season than it has been in past years, because we had the COVID fifth year for the longest time. Lots of these guys have moved on. Going back to USC, we were talking about them a few minutes ago. Chad Baker-Mazaro just feels like he's going to be the Van Wilder of college basketball, but most of these guys, they are no longer there. And how important is it for gauging these freshmen? Because I recognize that a lot of these power conference teams, they are now looking a little bit more at transfers rather than freshmen, but we just mentioned it with Kentucky, and there's a lot of teams out there in the ACC where you're covering that they are going to have some big-time freshmen that are going to be expected to play big minutes right away.
Yeah, the ACC is going to, and they've, had success with freshmen in the past. I think one freshman that's flying under the radar that could be incredibly impactful is Jalen Harrelson, the 6'7" guard wing for Notre Dame. He's going to be someone that, if he's really good, can raise their ceiling because they already have one of the better backcourts in the country. And then, Sheldon Henderson, the former Duke commit, who's a 5-star wing in his own right, he's going to have an opportunity as well. Syracuse has a couple of top 40 freshmen, and obviously everyone knows about Mikal Brown, the Louisville stud point guard, and Duke's, annual number one class. So, yeah, I think if you're looking for a really good freshman to find a role, they're going to be all throughout the ACC, especially with some of the teams who, couldn't get 10 players in the portal, but were able to find, some potential late risers or hidden gem in the 2025 class this offseason. I think a few of them could be guys to watch too.
Yep, they certainly will be. And obviously in your conference, the ACC, the new coaches are going to be worth watching as well. And I do think that with regards to both the Big Ten and the ACC, as we were talking about the Big Ten a few minutes ago as well, they just did such a good job of being able to elevate their conference, as we could tell that they were slipping behind the Big 12 and the SEC in the past few years. And I think that the coaching moves that both conferences made this year, every single one of them, I thought was relatively rock solid. Maybe have a few question marks with Florida State for this upcoming season, but by and large, I take a look at the ACC and the Big Ten, and I really thought that they elevated this offseason with those moves.
Yeah, and there could be another batch of coaches on the hot seat as well, and we'll have to see what happens with Luke Locks of Florida State. Obviously, Ryan Odom has a lot of fanfare from leading VCU to the tournament, having new system implemented at Virginia. But yeah, for the ACC to get back to being in that top tier outside of the usual suspect of Duke, they're going to need a few of these teams to step up. They're going to need North Carolina to get back to being top 10 good. They're going to need teams like Clemson, and then the former Big East schools like Pitt, Notre Dame, and Syracuse to get back to being top 25 good. Because, yeah, you have 18 teams, you're going to have some bottom tier ones, but you can't have too many because it automatically brings down the whole conference.
Yep, and that's a topic that we have talked about on this podcast for years. The likes of Boston College, Georgia Tech, from time to time Notre Dame, just completely pile driving down the rest of the conference, which is been a big reason why a team like a Wake Forest has not been able to bust out, make the NCAA tournament as well. So certainly that is going to be worth watching for. And with regards to all of your work, Tristan, I know that you're doing an amazing job getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. And as you've been researching these last few weeks, has there been a team or two that you've either become a little bit more bullish/bearish on as you've been looking at them, or maybe they've had an exhibition result or two that has made you change your tune on them just a little bit?
We haven't had many exhibition games so far yet. I think if you want to look at some of the news that's been coming, Cincinnati was a team that could have been a potential threat in the Big 12, but Jalen Haynes, who was the transfer forward from George Mason, who was first team All A-10, he's going to be out with a lower body injury. They already lost Jizzle James. There's just a lot of questions about whether or not they're going to be able to score, even if Sean Abev, our star freshman forward, if he has an impact. Kerr Kriesler might be their go-to guard now. And I just don't know if Cincy is going to be able to get out of the bottom. And if that happens, then what's going to happen to the coach Miller, who's going to be on the hot seat this year.
Yep, and I am right there with you with Cincinnati. When they lost Jizzle James, I was very much out on them. I am still not feeling that Cincinnati team moving forward, and you mentioned it with Wes Miller. He might have one of the hottest seats in all of college basketballs. I thought he was going to be on the hot seat last year as well, so that's going to be an interesting situation, as Bill Belichick says. We're on to Cincinnati, and I know you, Tristan, are on to getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. You've been doing amazing work all off season getting set. I know you've done a great job every time you've joined this podcast. You've got a lot of articles, you've got a lot of podcasts, so much more coming out. So love to give people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can follow me at Hoopsmith351 on Twitter/X, and then also follow my main site, Bustin' Brackets, for finishing up preseason content, and then just in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to preview the actual games.
Yep, we are about 2.5 weeks away from the start of the college basketball season. Cannot come soon enough, as I know that Tristan and I always love taking a look forward, but there's nothing like being able to break down games, and Tristan, every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, RCM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We are up to over 2,150 straight days without a missed podcast, so you can bank on me being with you guys once again tomorrow, and we are getting almost all set with regards to our conference previews. We've got one conference left to do a preview podcast for. That'll be the Big Ten. That'll be coming up within the next few days, maybe the next week or so, as we got plenty of time there, but we're less than 3 weeks away from the start of the college basketball season. I'm starting my handicap lines. You're going to be getting picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, once those games are back in our lives. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.